by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions, and this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged. But again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can say
what does intersex mean?
Is that there's a difference between sex and gender. And I think in these conversations, we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay.
Welcome to Liberty Watchtower. Liberty Watchtower keeps you informed, engaged, and ready to think critically. Subscribe and stay tuned. Freedom starts with awareness. Now, let's dive in. In recent years, debates surrounding sex, gender identity, and fairness in competitive sports have gained national and international attention, raising deeply important questions at the intersection of science, human rights, and public policy. These conversations often occur in emotionally and politically charged spaces, particularly when involving the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's sports, as society grapples with how best to balance individual rights, biological realities, and institutional fairness. At the core of these debates is the distinction between sex and gender, two concepts that are frequently conflated, but have important differences. Sex refers to a person's biological characteristics, such as chromosomes, hormone levels, and reproductive organs typically categorized as male or female, with a smaller percentage of the population born intersex, possessing variations in sex traits that do not fit conventional definitions. Gender, by contrast, is understood as a social and psychological construct involving how individuals perceive themselves and how they are perceived by society. It encompasses a wide range of identities beyond the traditional binary of man and woman, including non-binary, genderqueer, agender, and others. As understandings of gender evolve particularly among younger generations, and within academic and advocacy circles, institutions such as schools, athletic leagues, and legislatures are being called upon to redefine policies that were built on a more rigid binary framework. These shifts raise key questions. How many genders are there? Should gender identity determine eligibility in sex-segregated spaces like sports teams, prisons, or restrooms? And how do we ensure fair competition while also affirming the dignity and rights of transgender and gender-diverse individuals?
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses here today. Ms. Robinson, I want to follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions, and this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I wouldn't even say two, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that. Just. Do you think there are more than two sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged. But
Intersex.
again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
And
say
what does intersex mean?
is that there's a difference between sex and gender. And I think in these conversations, we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex, okay? There's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I
More
talk
than
to young
five?
people
More
that
than-
talk about non-binary as...
More than 5?
I think the gender is not a binary is what I'm trying
But
to say.
are there more than 5 genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I mean, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our
gender
gender
that
are
5
expansive.
genders? Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is
there
that
an
gender is a
infinite
reflection.
number?
Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are 3 sexes, male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And
so
there are an infinite number of genders because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real world experience?
It depends. I mean, there are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are
You don't
shorter.
believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female.
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female.
A particularly intense flashpoint has emerged in women's sports, where some argue that transgender women, biological males who identify and often transition to female, may retain physiological advantages that could undermine fair competition. Others argue that trans individuals face extraordinary levels of marginalization and exclusion, and that access to sports is a fundamental part of inclusion, identity formation, and personal development. Within this context, policymakers and the public are seeking clarity, Does a biological male body inherently confer athletic advantages? And if so, to what degree do those advantages persist after medical transition? In a recent U.S. Senate hearing, these issues were brought to the forefront through a tense exchange between Senator John Kennedy and human rights campaign advocate Kelley Robinson. The exchange revealed not only a clash of perspectives, but also the broader societal divide over how we define truth, fairness, and inclusion in an era of changing norms. While Senator Kennedy emphasized the importance of recognizing biological distinctions and their implications for sports fairness, Mrs. Robinson advocated for the importance of recognizing gender identity and creating space for all individuals to define themselves freely, pointing to a broader cultural evolution in how gender is understood. This discussion, though centered on athletics, touches on foundational questions about how society should reconcile scientific evidence with lived experience and individual liberties with collective standards. To participate in this dialogue meaningfully, it is essential to explore the biological, psychological, and ethical dimensions of sex and gender, and to do so with intellectual honesty, respect for human dignity, and a commitment to fact-based discourse.
I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport. In sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chairman.
Kelley. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender Black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of the persons who are testifying today. For Ms. Robinson, do you know what